or within a context of the United States being really indebted, and specifically indebted to China. So right now, the United States owes a lot of money, and it owes it to China. And now Trump is also saying that any country that deals with the China alliance, BRICS, is going to be penalized. Well, you don't have the upper hand when you're dealing with your creditors. So if the United States is indebted to China, and China is kicking global ass on infrastructure, transportation, technology, cars, and science. I mean, China is the biggest. I think they are the biggest, but at least they're one of the biggest, but I think they are the biggest now. They are the biggest publisher of biomedical research now. So, trying to act like you're the big man on the block when you're not the big man on the block anymore that's called fuck around and find out. And again, I'll show you some of the headlines that I'm looking at, but the world is obviously changing. America is in debt. The axis of power that maybe used to be NATO certainly isn't the same as it was, 50 or 70 years ago.
All right, today we're going to talk about how we can find out and how much we can find out and what it takes to get there. So first we have to decide how much do we want to find out. So let's say in this case, I want to find out at a level of 7. Okay, so I find that level on my graph and I come horizontally to my gradient line. Where it intersects with my gradient line, I'm going to come straight down to where it intersects with my fuck around line. Now there's going to tell me how much I have to fuck around to find out what I need to find out. See, as you can see, the more you fuck around, the more you're going to find out.
All right, let's turn back to the White House and President Trump's decision to raise tariffs on steel and aluminum imports from 25 to 50%.
We're going to bring it from 25% to 50%, the tariffs on steel into the United States of America.
Canadian steel and aluminum producers say it will have a devastating effect.
The latest tariffs on steel and aluminum are unjustified. They're illegal. They're bad for American workers, bad for American industry, and of course for Canadian industry as well.
Factories have gone quiet. The machines are still there, but the people are gone. 100,000 jobs wiped out almost overnight. This wasn't triggered by foreign competition or advanced robotics. It started with a single policy decision, a 50% tax on aluminum. At the time, it was sold as a bold move to protect American workers, a promise to bring back strength to local industry. But what followed was shutdowns, pink slips, and disappointment. As US towns struggle with layoffs, Canada is quietly reaping the benefits. Now those once loyal to the plan are questioning everything.
The more you fuck around, the more you're going to find out.
Happy Sunday, everybody. Dr. Vasquez here, coming to you live for 2 more days in this hotel, and then I get to escape from this bad art. Going to try to keep this video very short, hopefully less than 4 minutes or 5 minutes. But I noticed last night I was looking at a few videos, and I kept getting a consistent theme from many different sources from these videos. And some of these people are reasonably authoritative, but the conversation is centering around some forecasted economic problems in the United States due to Trump's tariffs, but not simply due to Trump's tariffs. I mean, obviously he's a loose cannon and he has no political or social acumen, but sometimes, a situation needs a loose cannon to stir things up. And so I think people who supported him at times supported him for good reasons, because obviously America needs some change. But that change needs to be, implemented with some level of political and social acumen, not just throwing tariffs around like they're, penalties for, disobedient children or something. So anyway, because of the tariffs, I'm just giving some examples now, but I'm going to include one clip, and I'm going to include all these source videos below this video. So you can look at it and make whatever decision you want. But every once in a while, I've seen a few videos by one particular investor, and I don't even know what his name is, but I have seen a handful of his videos, and he's been very accurate in what he has predicted. And so when I saw his video aligning with all of these other videos, I thought, whoa, it's time to pay attention. So I am going to include a clip. It's just a 30-second clip, but I'll make it probably 10 seconds. I am going to include a clip of what he says because he's obviously a successful investor. And then you can look at the other videos below.
And so make sure you're diversified geographically. My big theme over the last 6 months, and I've been saying this over and over, is that if you're just an SPY or in the NASDAQ and you think you're diversified because you're in an index fund, you're not. Because I believe the US is going to go flat for the next decade. And if you look at the P of 26 versus Germany at 22, Japan at 18, China at 14, and you look at the head up your ass, sclerotic, reckless, ridiculously fucking stupid decisions of this administration and how it's undermining our brand of rule of law and consistency, that is going to result in massive multiple contraction. And it doesn't matter how good the company is. If the broader market is engaging, is registering multiple contraction, you can't outrun it. So I have been massively transitioning my US holdings into Asian, European, and also the only companies I invest in have at least 50% of their business abroad, because I think the US is about to go into a 10 or 15 year down cycle, because I think the US is about to go into a 10 or 15 year down cycle.
But what they're all talking about are Trump's tariffs, the collapse of certain industries like tourism, because now they're adding so many fees and problems for people who want to visit the US. That's going to be a multi-billion-dollar industry that suffers, if not collapses.
Australia, Canada, Germany, Denmark, France, the UK, and Finland all just issued travel advisory warnings against the United States. They don't think that it's safe for people from their country to travel to this fucking hellhole, and they are absolutely right. Are we great yet? Is it cool when other countries are terrified of having their citizens visit here because they might end up in prison, and maybe they'll get murdered in a U.S. prison like that Canadian did just a couple of weeks ago, which I'm sure everyone's already forgotten about, because every day is full of so much terrible news we can't even keep up with it. Donald Trump's America absolutely sucks balls, and any person who says that they really like it right now is the kind of person who enjoys living in terror. There is some number of people who really enjoy authoritarianism, but I have to tell you guys a secret here. Nobody ends up doing great in an authoritarian regime. Exactly. Nobody ends up doing well. This doesn't end well for anyone.
The aluminum industry, the petroleum industry, the export industry for American, obviously, goods, but including specifically agricultural goods, because of Trump's kind of tariffs. I mean, you can call them tariffs or you can call it harassment, but his behavior towards Mexico and Canada is causing those countries apparently to bypass the United States. So they're going to form their own alliance and just bypass dealing with the US, as are many other countries.
The balance in North America has been upset. Mexico and Canada are set to establish the Northern Corridor route, which will bypass US President Donald Trump's 30% tariff on steel and auto parts. Canada and Mexico are preparing to divert $120 billion worth of trade from US customs ports to their own ports. Will this joint escape plan collapse Detroit's assembly lines and force Washington to back down? Now, we will examine in detail how Canada and Mexico will respond to President Trump's new tariffs and how this action will affect US-Canada-Mexico trade relations.
Trump also sent out something recently saying that he was going to penalize all countries that used oil from Venezuela. He was going to penalize all countries that worked with the BRICS organization. What is that? Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and a few other countries. Well, as one of the videos talks about, they are the economic powerhouse of the globe right now. So, you know, and I'm not trying to be political about this necessarily, but I'm just trying to be observant and factual. Trump seems to be behaving as if the United States was still the dominant financial and military power in the world, and that's not the case anymore. So, I'm sure you've heard the saying, I'll include this clip just because it's funny, and it's pretty accurate for right now. I'm sure you've heard the phrase, fuck around and find out. Well, the United States under Trump, like I said, can't just throw tariffs against allies, because that's going to turn them into enemies. And that is what's happening, and it is starting to impact the United States. I mean, look at prices. I even saw a few videos. I don't like Las Vegas, but for some reason I saw a few videos related to the economy and the prices of Las Vegas, and people are saying it's a complete disaster. So, and that's because they're trying to compensate for low tourism by raising their prices, because they're just trying to survive. But the situation, according to a lot of data inputs, is not looking good. Plus the other thing, I mean, I know some people are going to say, among other things that they're going to say, but some people are going to say, oh yeah, well, people have been predicting this forever. But yeah, the United States is in more debt now than ever. You're seeing big alliances with huge countries. Brazil is a huge country. China is obviously huge. I mean, if you look at the BRICS group of countries, and those are some they are the largest in terms of political and economic and population base. I mean, that is the biggest union right now, as far as I know. I mean, I don't even care about politics, but I care about seeing what the trends are. And America is facing a situation they've never faced before. So you can't say, oh yeah, well, we've had problems before, we've had panic before, we've been told that the world is going to collapse or whatever. Yeah, you may have been told that in the past, and maybe it didn't happen, or maybe it has been slowly happening, but you haven't had oppositional relationships with your own neighbors as you do now with Mexico, Canada, and these blanket policies of alienation. Like, we're gonna put a 10% tariff on any, or whatever it was, I think it was 10%. We're gonna put a 10% tariff on any country that deals with Venezuela. Well, I mean, come on, Venezuela has the most oil of any country in the world right now. So obviously some countries are going to use their oil, but that doesn't necessarily mean you have to turn them into an enemy. Although I understand why he would want to do that. I mean, the situation in Venezuela has been horrible for years. So Trump is trying to, collapse the Venezuelan economy so that they get rid of their dictator. That by itself is reasonable, but it has to be done in a reasonable way, So do whatever you want, make whatever decisions you want, ignore this if you want, or just deny it or whatever. But you could also look at the videos that follow this one and maybe get some more perspectives, just like I did. I mean, I looked at all those videos. But like I said, when I saw multiple pillars of economic support within the United States being discussed as on the verge of collapse from multiple sources, within a setting or within a context of the United States being really indebted, and specifically indebted to China. So right now, the United States owes a lot of money, and it owes it to China. And now Trump is also saying that any country that deals with the China alliance, BRICS, is going to be penalized. Well, you don't have the upper hand when you're dealing with your creditors. So if the United States is indebted to China, and China is kicking global ass on infrastructure, transportation, technology, cars, and science. I mean, China's the biggest. I think they are the biggest, but at least they're one of the biggest, but I think they are the biggest now. They are the biggest publisher of biomedical research now. So, trying to act like you're the big man on the block when you're not the big man on the block anymore, that's called fuck around and find out. And again, I'll show you some of the headlines that I'm looking at, but the world is obviously changing. America is in debt. The axis of power that maybe used to be NATO certainly isn't the same as it was, 50 or 70 years ago.
All right, today we're going to talk about how we can find out and how much we can find out and what it takes to get there. So first we have to decide how much do we want to find out. So let's say in this case, I want to find out at a level of 7. Okay, so I find that level on my graph and I come horizontally to my gradient line. Where it intersects with my gradient line, I'm going to come straight down to where it intersects with my fuck around line. Now there's going to tell me how much I have to fuck around to find out what I need to find out. See, as you can see, the more you fuck around, the more you're going to find out.
All right, let's turn back to the White House and President Trump's decision to raise tariffs on steel and aluminum imports from 25 to 50%.
We're going to bring it from 25% to 50%, the tariffs on steel into the United States of America.
Canadian steel and aluminum producers say it will have a devastating effect.
The latest tariffs on steel and aluminum are unjustified. They're illegal. They're bad for American workers, bad for American industry, and of course for Canadian industry as well.
Factories have gone quiet. The machines are still there, but the people are gone. 100,000 jobs wiped out almost overnight. This wasn't triggered by foreign competition or advanced robotics. It started with a single policy decision, a 50% tax on aluminum. At the time, it was sold as a bold move to protect American workers, a promise to bring back strength to local industry. But what followed was shutdowns, pink slips, and disappointment. As US towns struggle with layoffs, Canada is quietly reaping the benefits. Now those once loyal to the plan are questioning everything.
The more you fuck around, the more you're going to find out.
The dollar has already lost over the last 30 years a good bit of its international importance. I mean, if you look today at the proportion of reserves held in the central banks of 180 countries across the world, it used to be 70-80% of their reserves, the backing for their currency, was US dollar holders. Today, that number is more around 40 to 50%. So they've already voted with their feet. You know, the United States is also the world's greatest debtor country. We owe more to the rest of the world than any other country does. And our two biggest creditor countries are Japan and China. For those of you who are wondering about the Chinese potential, try to think what it means that the United States is the world's largest debtor, and the second most important creditor of the United States is the People's Republic of China. Xi Jinping. And you know, if you're a debtor, you have to pay interest. So the United States has to pay interest to China because it owes China currently in the neighborhood of $750 billion. Gee, at say 4%, that means the United States government has to pay a 4% interest on $750 billion. That's about $35 billion a year that Uncle Sam collects from you and me, doesn't use it for our military, doesn't use it to build roads or to help our hospitals or finance our kids' college education. No, it takes that $35 billion and sends it in a big fat envelope to the People's Republic of China, who can and does use it to build their roads and their schools and their military. And if you didn't know that, that's because you live in a country that can't handle the truth of its own economic system. It can't tell its people what's going on in a fair and balanced way. Our culture is corrupted above all by advertising. Remember what the advertiser's job is, to tell you everything good about whoever the client of the advertiser is, and to hide from you everything that's bad. That makes communication the equivalent of lying. We live in a country where people, particularly politicians, think of themselves as marketing themselves to the public. Tell them everything good you can imagine and hide from them everything that might upset them. What that produces is the lunacy we are now living through. I need to explain to people that reality, the BRICS, 8 or 9 member countries and another dozen or so partner countries that are on their way to becoming member countries. It started off, the very word BRICS is an anagram, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. That's what BRICS stands for. And then a bunch of countries have joined since. If you want to understand what it means, let me give you 2 statistics. You know, I'm an economist. That's what we do. We play with statistics, the way little children play with toys. And it is, let me assure you, a toy. The population of the United States, 330 million, works out to 4.5% of the world's people. If you put together the United States with its major allies, the so-called Group of Seven, or G7, it's the United States, Canada, Japan, Britain, France, Germany, and Italy. What was the core of the world economy for the last 75 years. You add up their populations and you come up with, 15, 16% of the world's people. Now let me turn to the BRICS. You add them all up, it's over half the people of this planet. No contest. They are large and we are small. Let me give you the second statistic. In economics, we have a rough measure of the size of an economy. It's called the GDP, Gross Domestic Product. And every country and the UN keep track of that. Okay, if you add up the gross domestic product of the G7, that's the United States and its major allies, it works out to about 28% of the total output of this planet that we live on here, Earth. If you do the same, you add up the GDP of the BRICS alliance, it's 35% of the world's output. In other words, the United States and its allies, who were from 1945 to around 2010, 12, 15, the dominant economic powerhouse. And what does that mean? It means when every country, any country in Asia, Africa, or Latin America needed help in one way or another, they would send a mission to New York or Washington or London, and they would hope to get this and so forth. And they had pitch people go and explain why that would be helpful and so forth. Nowadays, they do that. They send a mission to New York and London, but that mission doesn't go back to its African country of origin or its Latin American country. They go directly from Washington and London to Beijing and New Delhi and Sao Paulo.
Yes.
And they make the same pitch there.
And they're more likely to receive a fair hearing of that pitch in those
not only
countries.
that, because they're dealing with the richer of the two options. And they're going to therefore get, not every time, but most of the time, a better offer. That's why they go. And the Chinese, who are the major player here, are the ones who say, yes, we'll build a railroad and we'll do it for this amount of money less than what the Americans or the British or the French or the Germans offered you. And so, by the way, the railroads of Africa are currently being built by China. And China is making all the inroads that go with all of that. This is a changed world. Let me assure you and your audience, every country in the world, and more than that, every large corporation doing business across boundaries of countries is readjusting its investment plans, its calculations, its strategic decisions to take account of the fact that the world economy is now dominated by something other than the United States and Western Europe, or add Canada or Japan. And you're not going to change that. You're not going to stop that.
The more you fuck around, the more you're going to find out.
I think we're just collateral damage because if you look at the US beef industry, they're the largest in the world.
$5 billion in vanished orders. That's the gut punch U.S. ranchers felt when ports across Asia stamped "Return to Sender" on whole shiploads of American beef and pork. In the very same week, Canadian packers quietly locked down a record contract of almost equal value. Their Maple Leaf brand now splashed across menus from Tokyo's Ginza to Seoul's Gangnam. Back home, the recoil was instant. Ground beef surged $1.90 a tray, bacon flirted with $10 a pound, and grocers warned of another 15% jump before Labor Day. How did Washington's tariff gamble backfire so hard that Canada, not Texas, is suddenly feeding half the Pacific Rim? And what does that mean for your next backyard cookout? Tonight we trace every rejected steak, expose the hidden choke points in the supply chain, and reveal how a single policy memo could kneecap a $200 billion farm economy.
The more you fuck around, the more you're going to find out.
So, trying to transfer that previous reality into our current situation with the BRICS alliance, the fact that Venezuela has the most oil in the United States, and Trump is doing a lot of anti-Venezuela stuff, which I think is totally reasonable. Let me refine that slightly. I think trying to topple the Maduro regime in Venezuela, I think that's completely reasonable. But like I said, it has to be done in a reasonable way. And I'm not saying I know what that reasonable way would be, but given the fact that Venezuela has most of the oil on the planet right now, attacking them or attacking any of their customers when the United States is in such a weak position, that may not be a good choice. So remember what I said recently in the other video that you can look at. I said if you haven't considered it before, you need to be taking action on flexibility, international flexibility. You know, if you're going to move, maybe you need to learn a new language. If you're going to stay home, you better have, you know, your finances lined up. But I did say, you know, flexibility is the new stability. And so, you know, look at the horizon of events and maybe take action on what you see, or ignore it and hope for the best. But based on the videos that I just saw last night, I wasn't even looking for these videos, but based on what I saw last night, I personally am going to make some changes, hopefully this coming week, in certain strategies that I have, that I've kind of ignored, that I haven't taken action on. But now I think the time is definitely, for me, in my situation with what I'm talking about, the time is now for me to take action. And it's based on looking at all these videos that I'm going to include on the page below this post. So have a great Sunday. Hope you're doing well. Take care. Bye. So number one, appreciate that flexibility is the new stability. Number two, learn a second language. And the best bang for the buck is Spanish. And number three, get your money mobile and flexible so that when and if you decide to move, or when and if you decide to travel, boom, you've got money in that currency ready to go. Those are the easiest things.
Regarding the flu block product, this is truly an innovative technology. It involves the use of insect cells to rapidly manufacture the product. This is a cell-based influenza vaccine.
We're way ahead on vaccines. You wouldn't have a vaccine if it weren't for me for another 4 years, because FDA would have never been able to do what they did, what I forced them to do.
My vision is that every American is wearing a wearable within 4 years.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. If you think this has a happy ending, you haven't been paying attention.
Third point in this quick summary is no one knows what the hell is going to happen with the United States right now with this push for, you know, biometric tracing. But I think we should all pay attention to that. And that alone is reason to, you know, have some, you know, international and social and therefore linguistic and financial flexibility.
Is supposedly a company for continuous glucose monitoring device that's supposedly a wearable. Now, what kind of wearable has a wire that goes into your body, under your skin? Legally, that's not a wearable. That is an inserted device. That is biometric surveillance from the inside.
Well, first of all, Klaus, I want to congratulate you. This is an incredible group of people. We had dinner last night with about 15 leaders of industry, none of whom I knew, but all of whom I've read about for years, and it was truly an incredible group. But I think I have 15 new friends. So this has been really great what you've done in putting it together, the economic.
If you think this has a happy ending, you haven't been paying attention.
My vision is that every American is wearing a wearable within 4 years.
Good morning, everybody. Dr. Vasquez here, obviously coming to you live. And this is going to be a short video of one that I've thought about for a while, but I feel a renewed, obviously, interest to do this now. So I've wanted to do a video or a healthy thinking post, health homework, So this is health homework number 49. I've wanted to do a post on this topic for a while, so here it is, health homework number 49. The theme or the overview is that flexibility is the new stability. So, and this is, you know, obviously I've played this out in my own life for the past 12 years, living, you know, pretty internationally. And that's served me very well. It's been, you know, one of the gifts of my life that in a sense I've given to myself, but and I admit, you know, I've been lucky in some things. I was lucky enough to be, you know, educated in the United States and speak English and be relatively free of major diseases. And, you know, those are advantages that a lot of people don't have. So, like, I don't take for granted the fact that I've had a good life. But on top of that, I've also made good decisions. And one of the good decisions I've made is maintaining a level of social and strategic kind of flexibility. So I'm going to talk about that right now. And I'm not trying to make this, overly complicated or even overly expensive. So I'm going to show you some things that you could do to improve your own flexibility and why you would want to do that. Some things you can do that are free and that you could implement today to start improving your own, social or global and to some extent financial flexibility. So that's what I'm going to talk about right now. For those of you who have followed my blog for a while, you're going to see some themes that I mentioned here I've talked about before, but I don't even know if anybody's paid attention to those. And perhaps they haven't gotten the attention they need because they were a little bit out of context. So I'm going to talk about those again, but within this context of being socially flexible and just globally flexible in a sense. So I think part of what's encouraged me to kind of reignite this theme is that over the last week, I'm sure some of you have also seen the video of Robert Kennedy Jr. talking about how his vision for American health is that all Americans are connected to wearable devices, and those, of course, will be implanted devices. He wants all Americans to be either using wearable or implanted biomedical tracing devices within the next 4 years, I think he said.
My vision is that every American is wearing a wearable within 4 years.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
And if you think that's good news, then you have no idea what's coming. So, even for Americans, now would be a reasonable time for you to reconsider your level of social and international flexibility. If you think Trump is going to save you and make you free and all that kind of stuff, you obviously haven't been paying attention. So Trump is obviously very proud of the fact. He was proud of it, and he is still proud of it. The fact that he was the father of the COVID vaccine, and he gave I believe it's either 17 or $14 billion to the drug companies to push this new, unproven, and now well known to be dangerous mRNA vaccine platform.
We're way ahead on vaccines. You wouldn't have a vaccine if it weren't for me for another 4 years, because FDA would have never been able to do what they did, what I forced them to do. And Pfizer and others even decided to not assess the results of their vaccine. In other words, not come out with a vaccine.
So he has never repented from that, even though the data is, it's so obvious now that it's almost common sense that, the entire COVID pandemic response was a complete failure globally, but even worse in the United States, because in the United States it was much more expensive. And America had 4 times the number of deaths of other countries. So, it was just a complete disaster. And he's obviously never going to apologize for all the mistakes that he made, even though some of us think those mistakes were rather obvious at the moment he was making them. So I think a lot of us Americans felt a bit of a chill when Robert Kennedy, who a lot of people thought was going to save the United States from whatever bullshit and make America healthy again and all this kind of stuff. Obviously, he's making progress on the vaccines. But for him to then turn around and say he wants all Americans to have a wearable or implanted biomedical tracing device within the next, I believe he said 4 years. That you got to be concerned about that.
My vision is that every American is wearing a wearable within 4 years.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Especially when you consider the ties that a lot of these people in Trump's government have with biotech companies. So anyway, do whatever you want. Ignore what I'm talking about. You can say it's all conspiracy. Fine. Everybody said COVID was a conspiracy when it first got launched.
The nominee for Surgeon General, which is not just a ceremonial position by any means.
CIA casting Kelly Means, we're talking about?
Precisely. CIA casting Casey Means
Casey, yeah,
is terribly, terribly frightening because she's a transhumanist. She's a biodigital convergence gal.
Wow.
And her company, Levels, is supposedly a company for continuous glucose monitoring device that's supposedly a wearable. Now, what kind of wearable has a wire that goes into your body, under your skin? Legally, that's not a wearable. That is an inserted device. That is biometric surveillance from the inside. And she thinks that's great. And as Naomi Wolf very, very beautifully elaborated, she was funded to hundreds of millions of dollars for nothing from nowhere. How did that happen exactly? For non-leading edge technology.
I don't know. My wallet's a little light. I don't know. How does that happen?
I don't know, but I'd like some. You know? Could I have some? She is there to introduce biometric surveillance at the most invasive level as part of making us into pieces of the Internet of Bodies, which is part of the slave system.
Yeah. My vision is that every American is wearing a wearable within 4 years.
So anyway, do whatever you want. Ignore what I'm talking about. You can say it's all conspiracy. Fine. Everybody said COVID was a conspiracy when it first got launched also. And now we've had 5 years of nonstop pandemic and then transgender stuff going on all over the world. And all of the NATO countries, have opened their borders for immigrants. And I'm not anti-immigrant. I've lived as an immigrant in other countries. But, come on. Having wide open borders is obviously a disaster. And it's continuing to be a disaster. But none of that's accidental, And we saw it when we lived in Spain. Spain had many programs for immigrants where immigrants could come into the country, live for free, get educated for free. And at least the immigrants from China could get 5 or 10 years of running a business tax-free. Even the Spaniards couldn't do that. So obviously that created a lot of animosity among the Spaniards because, they were like looking at, a bunch of people coming in from China, opening, 5 and dime stores, but doing that for free when a Spaniard can't even get a business loan. So, obviously the government of the European Union is clearly part of a strategy to destroy the European Union itself, because the European Union was paying countries like Spain for these absurd immigration policies. And the other thing in Spain that we saw, and this benefits immigrants and it hurts the nationals, is that let's say a person lives in Spain their whole life and they have a house and they go on vacation over the weekend, go to a hotel or whatever, and they come back to their house and someone else is living in their house. The Spanish owner of the house is obligated to continue paying the mortgage, electricity, water, and whatever other utilities like gas. They are obligated to continue paying for the house, even though they've been robbed of their own house. That's just absurd. But, that's just one very concrete and important example of how the Spanish government was using these immigration policies to basically turn their own country against their own citizens.
Well, first of all, Klaus, I want to congratulate you. This is an incredible group of people. We had dinner last night with about 15 leaders of industry, none of whom I knew, but all of whom I've read about for years, and it was truly an incredible group. But I think I have 15 new friends. So this has been really great what you've done in putting it together, the Economic Forum.
What is your message to the senators at your trial this week? Why is it better to be here in Davos than in Washington, D.C.?
Well, we're here meeting with world leaders, the biggest, most important people in the world, and we're bringing back tremendous business in the United States, and they're all here to see. We look forward to being here. Klaus has done a fantastic job. And again, we're meeting with the biggest companies in the world, the biggest businesses in the world, and world leaders, all for the benefit of the United States. We look forward to the meetings.
What's your message to the senators at the trial, sir?
So anyway, my impression is that basically no country is stable. And for that reason, I like to bounce around when things go to hell. And the other thing is, let me just mention this, because this is also very clear in my mind, and this is obviously from my own experience. In January of 2020, we were living in Spain, and I remember saying to myself that Europe in general and Spain were the best places to live in the world because, you know, Spain has so much history and architecture from medieval to Art Nouveau, and it was just wonderful infrastructure, and the prices were very reasonable. Like, for example, I bought a distressed apartment in Tarragona, Spain, which is about an hour outside of Barcelona. And I paid 29,000 euros for it, you know, and it was a 3-bedroom attic in a bad neighborhood. And bad as in it was a pretty poor neighborhood, a little bit dirty, but it wasn't too bad. And we were 15 minutes from the Mediterranean. So yeah, the neighborhood wasn't that great. And I fixed up the apartment very well because I'm good at carpentry. But I mean, you can't buy a 3-bedroom attic apartment anywhere in the United States in a desirable area, like next to the Mediterranean Sea, you know, for 29,000 euros, which would be, at that time, that was about maybe $34,000 or so. Anyway, I mean, Europe was very cheap. The infrastructure is amazing. The architecture is great. A lot of things are very low cost. And so I was thinking, you know, before the pandemic started, that Europe was the greatest and Spain was awesome. And then we got hit with the pandemic, and we couldn't even, we were on quarantine, like home quarantine for, I believe, 3 or 4 months. We couldn't leave the house, except for essentials like buying food and things like that. They closed all the parks, they closed all the gyms and things like that. So again, I'm using that as an example to show you that countries can change quickly. And take it or leave it, but my advice to you is to increase your level of flexibility so that wherever you live, if it gets worse, or if they do another pandemic lockdown, that you've got some flexibility. So obviously, you know, English is my first language. And so here's a map of the English-speaking world. And you actually it doesn't give you a lot of options, in my opinion. I personally would never, you know, live in Canada, especially after the changes that have occurred in Canada under Trudeau. Obviously, I've lived most of my life in the United States. But outside of that, you've got a couple of South African countries. I'm not going to live in South Africa. I'm not going to live in Australia or New Zealand because they had horrible lockdowns. And in my opinion, those countries aren't even worth considering anymore. Do what you want. But I would never even visit Australia or New Zealand based on their COVID policies. My family history actually originated on my mom's side from Ireland and then the UK. That's where my second last name or my middle, depending on what country you're in. It's either my second last name or my middle name. But my mother's side of the family, Kennerly, was rumored to have come from Ireland, but also a little bit south of London is a little town called Kennerley. And that seems to be where my most recent English grandparents were from. So, you know, a lot of times, you know, back in the old days and medieval times and even the 1800s, people were named for their cities. And so Kennerley, again, is a little town in Devon outside of London, about 3 hours outside of London. And you can obviously see that Kennerley, which is kind of like saying Kenner Town, could get, you know, Americanized into Kennerley, which is what it is now. So anyway, despite my ancestry in England and Ireland, I would never go back there. I would never live there. I'm not going to live in India. And like I said, I'm never going to go to Africa. So, you know,